Opaline Wren's first morning in New York began with fire alarms and shattered illusions. The alarms belonged to her sublet, a fourth-floor walk-up in Nolita where the ancient radiator hissed like a wounded dragon and tripped the smoke detector whenever it warmed beyond lukewarm. The illusion that broke was subtler, the idea that a freshly minted English Lit major from Millbridge College could glide into a billion-dollar empire simply because she could catalog its founder's labyrinthine paper trail. When she'd answered Helios Industries' listing for a personal archivist, she pictured hushed libraries and polite dust. Instead she found herself hustling through sliding doors of black glass, staring up at a 20-meter atrium that felt part cathedral, part cyclone. Cash and Lock's headquarters pulsed with kinetic design, holographic stock tickers streaming along mezzanine rails, elevators without buttons because the sensors already knew your destination, tables that doubled as touchscreens and whispered your caffeine preferences when you passed. Opaline's entire hometown budget could not have paid 1 month's electric bill here. Human Resources gave her a copper-colored badge and a directive: Mr. Locke wants you to start in Sublevel 2. Physical Archives. Wear flats. They did not mention that Sublevel 2 was a subterranean maze of temperature-controlled vaults stacked with the wreckage of every failing company Locke had ever acquired, floppy disks from a 1990s software firm, ship logs from a bankrupt ocean freight line, even a cedar chest labeled Bright Skies Hot Air Balloons, 1934-78. Her job was to impose order, digitize everything, and surface narratives usable by Helios's communications team to buff Locke's legend. By day 3, the vault had swallowed her circadian rhythm. She learned to navigate by the map-room smell of aging acetate and by the chill that preceded the door to Climate Bay C. Each evening she emerged coated in specks of archival foam, usually long after sunrise to sunset employees had gone. That is why, late on Friday, she alone rode the elevator to the tower's 63rd floor to deliver a request for new barcode scanners. The executive assistant's desk stood empty, but the double doors to the penthouse office gaped open, spilling music, Miles Davis, muted trumpets smoothing the air like dark honey. Inside, the city unfurled beneath floor-to-ceiling windows, and Cash and Locke stood with his back to it, sleeves rolled, collar open, the edge of a whiskey tumbler tapping a restless rhythm against his thigh. He was mid-30s, rumor said, though the streaks of Winterwolf silver at his temples made him look ageless. His gaze snapped to Opaline, and for a moment she swore the skyscrapers outside tilted toward him, like iron filings aligning to a magnet. Archivist, he said, as if greeting a chess piece. Do you believe glass towers can bleed? She clutched the manila envelope of requisition forms. I can't say I've tested one. He gestured to the skyline. Look closely. Cracks everywhere. You just need night and a little bourbon to see them. He lifted the bottle, Dalmore 62, the kind collectors treat as currency, and poured far too much into a second glass. Does your contract forbid drinking with the devil? Heat prickled under Opaline's starched collar. My contract forbids breaching non-disclosure, sir. It doesn't mention scotch. Locke's smile flickered, not friendly but intrigued. Then indulge. Consider it hazard pay for spelunking my past. He pressed the glass into her hand, fingers grazing her knuckles. Absurd that touch could carry voltage through two polished professionals, yet it did. She tasted malt, peat, something older than the city throbbing below. In hindsight she would wonder if the liquor actually warmed her or if the warmth rose from his scrutiny. He asked what she had found in the archives. She spoke of balloon manifests, of handwritten margins where a bankrupt founder begged posterity for forgiveness. He listened with head cocked the way composers attend a dissonant chord. Another pour, another confession, hers this time, about leaving Ohio because every conversation there ended with, "You'll be back after you fail." Midnight spilled. The jazz track looped. Locke leaned closer, scent of cedar and winter mint wrapping around her. Failure is just a pivot point, he murmured. Question is which direction you pivot, toward the flame or away. Glass slipped from her fingertips to carpet, she did not hear it land. His mouth found hers, cool glass, warm whiskey, the shock of wanting eclipsing every cautionary tale a small-town pastor ever preached. He guided her down a corridor paneled in matte obsidian to a guest suite where the lights rose automatically to mimic candle glow. Their clothes left a breadcrumb trail, blazer on a travertine console, her sensible flats overturned like surrendered shields. Hands learned new alphabets across skin. She told herself there was agency in choosing, even if the choice burned. And when it came time to breathe a single irrevocable yes, she whispered truth into the shell of his ear, that no lover's map existed on her body yet. His reply was a ragged oath, half apology, half reverence, as though this admission fractured some defense inside him. He moved gently then, guiding rather than taking. Glass towers might bleed, but in that hour her body felt carved from living quartz, catching and throwing back whatever starlight dared trespass through blackout drapes. They slept in tangled silence until dawn painted slate ribbons across the ceiling. She woke first, heart bruising against ribs, expecting the warm weight of a forearm. But the pillow held only the faint indentation of his head. On the nightstand sat a silver fountain pen and a folded sheet of Helios letterhead. The line was spare, surgical. Meet me at 8:30. 4th floor. Dress code, ruthless honesty. Below, a single initial, C. Opaline's pulse hammered with equal parts dread and foolish hope. She showered, rewound her hair into a librarian's knot, and buttoned the same blouse she'd worn under her blazer last night, though its collar now felt too tight for oxygen. At 8:27 she entered the 4th floor board lounge, all frosted glass and moon-white oak. Cashin waited alone, sober as marble, a document open before him. Severance amount 6 figures deep, NDA paragraphs like barbed wire. Last night was a mistake, he said without looking up. For that mistake, I compensate you generously. Sign, and you'll leave Helios with reputation intact. The words landed colder than nitrile on skin still echoing heat. She tried to speak, language scattered. He pushed a Mont Blanc toward her, gaze still averted as if direct eye contact might admit complicity the contract was designed to erase. Only then did Opaline's shame ignite into something sharper. She capped the pen without signing, slid it back, and lifted her chin until he was forced to meet her eyes. The whiskey in his irises had iced over. She turned and walked away, each step a severing cord. Outside the lounge, the corridor yawned toward elevators that would drop her to the lobby and perhaps out of this orbit forever. But halfway down she halted, steadied herself against chilled glass, and realized the choice before her was no longer whether to pivot toward flame or away. The flame had already consumed yesterday's certainties, what remained was ash capable of fertilizing an entirely different future, one that no NDA could quarantine. When the elevator doors opened, the man inside was Lazarus Kittredge, Cashin's rival, a name whispered in every analyst call as the only predator Locke feared. He noticed her red-rimmed eyes, the unsigned contract clutched like contraband, and offered a handkerchief monogrammed with a winged hourglass. If Locke's burned something you value, Lazarus said, voice velvet over steel, perhaps you'd like to talk about rebuilding from the rubble. The elevators closed. Above, glass towers glittered under morning sun, hiding their cracks in plain sight. Below, Opaline felt the first tectonic nudge of regret harden into resolve, and the story truly began. Snow flurried against the taxi window as Opaline clutched Lazarus Kittredge's business card, bone-white stock embossed with a single phrase beneath his name, salvage the future. The man himself sat beside her, one arm stretched along the seat back, outwardly relaxed yet humming with kinetic intent, like a violin string tune just shy of breaking. After the elevator encounter he had ushered her through a side lobby, past marble columns and curious guards. Now they arrowed uptown toward his headquarters, Orion House, while Manhattan's Monday traffic ground its teeth below gray morning light. Coffee? He asked. You look as though Helios bleeds caffeine on the hour. She managed a nod. Her heartbeat still jittered from Cashin's cold dismissal, the severance documents weighed a phantom against her palms. Lazarus tapped the glass partition, the driver peeled across 2 lanes and halted outside a corner cafe. He returned with 2 cups, hers black, his laced with cardamom, and pressed a packet of raw sugar into her hand. No small talk about weather, no prying, the courtesy steadied her nerves better than cream. 20 minutes later the cab stopped before a century-old warehouse on the Hudson, its brick facade refitted with solar glass that reflected the river's steel glint. Inside, Orion House contrasted Helios's antiseptic luxury. White boards spanned walls like rebellious murals, ductwork gleamed overhead, and an espresso cart hissed in an atrium strung with filament bulbs. Employees, in hoodies, ankle boots, abayas, bright saris, clustered around stand-up desks, arguing cheerfully over code commits that scrolled on projected screens. Energy here swirled lateral, not top-down. Lazarus guided her to a mezzanine office furnished with only a long table, a skylight, and a complete absence of visible ego. He slid a folder toward her. "Here's what I know," he said, fingertips drumming a syncopated rhythm. Locke has quietly securitized Helios with short-term paper that matures in 90 days. He's betting a secret acquisition will spike valuation just before the notes come due. If that acquisition fails, say, because regulatory skeletons surface, Helios folds, and his creditors carve the carcass. But collateral damage will include 6,000 jobs and an R&D pipeline the planet could actually use. Opaline bristled. "You're asking me to sabotage the company that just tried to buy my silence." "I'm asking you to illuminate it," Lazarus corrected. "My team can source most data through public channels, but you've explored his vaults. You know where inconsistencies hide, subsidiary ledgers, contradictory patent filings, board meeting redactions. Give us threads, we'll weave the investigative net." She watched gulls whirl beyond the skylight and wrestled with conflict. Part of her craved vindication, part balked at betraying archival duty, however crooked its steward. "I signed no NDA," she said slowly, "but my professional ethics are why I trust you," he cut in. "You curate truth, not propaganda. Orion's charter demands the same." He opened the folder, a job offer on crisp paper, salary equal to Helios's hush money, plus equity. Title, Director of Heritage Integrity. You'd lead a small archival forensics team. All findings go open source after legal vetting, no hidden swords. She traced the salary figure with her thumb. Security. Independence. Yet memory flashed, Cashin cradling her face as though it were the last unbroken thing in his empire, the next morning's glacier in his eyes as he pushed the pen across mahogany. Betrayal twined with yearning until her breath nodded. "Why do you care about Helios collapsing?" she asked. A shadow skated across Lazarus's features. "Locke once tried to buy my first company, then patented around our core algorithm to choke investment. I survived, others he's steamrolled haven't. This isn't vengeance, Ms. Wren, it's structural repair. Markets reward opacity, someone has to prize daylight." The conviction in his voice felt gravity strong. Opaline inhaled, remembered the archive boxes she'd labeled fragile, handle with history and how Cashin had asked if glass towers could bleed. Perhaps they could, perhaps they should, if the wounds bled rot away. She extended her hand. Lazarus's grip was warm, decisive. "Welcome to Orion," he said. "You start whenever you're ready, though my engineers hope that means now. We've set up a secure workspace." "And Opaline?" His gaze softened. "No one here trades bodies for silence. Whatever happened on Locke's 63rd floor stays yours." Relief pricked behind her eyes. She followed him downstairs to a glass-walled studio where 3 analysts waited amid scanners and a humming RAID array. They greeted her like a long-lost code library. Within an hour she was unpacking the mental atlas of Helios archives, ticker symbols for dormant shells, dates of suspicious inventory write-offs, the box numbers where handwritten minutes contradicted glossy annual reports. She dictated, they typed, cross-links erupted on a wall-sized mind map. Late afternoon, as sunlight angled gold through warehouse windows, Opaline excused herself to the restroom. Alone, she braced her palms on a porcelain sink, meeting her reflection. The girl staring back seemed older by a fiscal quarter yet carried unbroken clarity in her eyes. She thought of Cashin's severance envelope, still in her tote, unsigned, and felt a pulse of something fierce, not spite, but requirement. If he wanted her gone to protect her, he'd misjudged both threat and target. She would protect herself, and perhaps even him, by refusing to disappear. Back at her workstation, she drafted an internal memo outlining her first objective: trace the ownership chain of Helios's newest SPV, Lantern Holdings, rumored vessel for the mystery acquisition. She ended the note with a line she'd never dared write until this day. Truth is not a weapon. It is a lighthouse. Let's build more beacons. She hit send. Minutes later Lazarus replied with a single emoji, an antique lantern flickering bright. And somewhere in a penthouse of black glass, Cashin Locke felt a tremor in the architecture of his carefully managed night and glanced east, unaware that a lighthouse had just lit inside the very woman he tried to pay into shadows. Dawn seeped through the high transom windows of Orion House like diluted copper when Opaline cracked open the dusty binder labeled Lantern Holdings 58K filings, draft. The document had come in overnight from an anonymous upload to Orion's secure drop, an act of whistle leaking so fresh the metadata still wore thermal fingerprints. She sat cross-legged on a rolling stool, sweatshirt sleeves yanked over her hands, flipping pages as the building's heating pipes began their morning clatter. Lantern, she discovered, was less a subsidiary than a labyrinth, a Delaware LLC nested inside a Cayman partnership, which in turn owned a shell corporation in Liechtenstein called Stanza AG. The filings revealed that Cashin Locke had authorized Stanza to acquire a bioremediation outfit near Lake Baikal, Soligreen, known for algae that digested petrosludge. That seemed philanthropic until she read the side letter granting Helios an option to strip mine Soligreen's gene patents and resell them to a plastics manufacturer infamous for offshore dumping. The acquisition closed in 49 days, perfectly timed to inflate Helios's ESG score before the convertible notes matured. Opaline's stomach tightened. The man who had murmured reverence against her skin planned to greenwash his empire with a shell game that left poisoned rivers. She set the binder down, pinched the bridge of her nose, and forced breath in counts of 4, the archival method for flattening panic. Lazarus found her like that an hour later, sunrise blazing behind him. "Bad news or nuclear?" he asked. "Both," she replied, sliding the binder across. He skimmed fast, jawline hardening. "We leak this and he's finished," Lazarus said. But Soligreen's algae could actually detoxify coastlines if left in ethical hands. If Helios implodes, those patents freeze in litigation for years. Opaline tapped the Liechtenstein charter where one clause glimmered with possibility: Stanza AG could be forced to divest if majority stakeholders filed an ethics breach before closing. "We don't just scorch him, we outmaneuver. Convince the other board members there's personal liability." "Means contact," Lazarus said. "Someone inside Helios has to carry the fuse." Her pulse hammered at the obvious name. "Contact Cashin." The thought felt like thermal shock, glass too hot plunged into ice. She swallowed. "I know someone with board access credentials." She didn't say his name, the room didn't need it. That afternoon she drafted an encrypted brief, a digest of Lantern's shell chain, Soligreen's true value, the implication for shareholder suits. She addressed it to Alara Nystrom, Helios's longest-serving independent director, reputed guardian of governance. The cover line read, "For the health of rivers, not margins." She hesitated before clicking send. Ghost sensations crowded her, the grip of Cashin's hands, the sting of his morning dismissal. But Rivers' beating plastic outweighed the bruise on her pride. She hit the key. Confirmation blinked. Message self-deleted from her desktop. Night laid its cobalt quilt across the river when Opaline finally left Orion for the subway. Wind funneled up Hudson Avenue, snatching breath from her lungs. She had only made it as far as the 23rd Street platform when her phone buzzed, unknown caller. A chill pricked her scalp. She let the call slide to voicemail, then listened on speaker while train brakes screeched. Cashin's voice filled the tunnel, low and hoarse. Opaline. I received material from Alara. She says it came by you. We need to discuss your interpretation of those documents before you cause collateral damage you can't foresee. Suite 10, Vesper Hotel. Midnight. The message ended. She stared at the tiled wall where a mosaic bluebird fluttered in eternal flight. Should she confront him alone? Every cautionary neuron screamed no, but strategy murmured yes. Knowledge extracted from Cashin could save Soligreen. She texted Lazarus, meeting lock midnight Vesper. Backup? Reply came in under a minute, tracker in your coat. Channel 9 on comm app. Pingyif trouble. The Vesper Hotel rose like a black obelisk above Bryant Park, its lobby perfumed with vetiver and hush money. Opaline's boots sank into charcoal carpet as she rode the private lift to the 10th floor. Suite doors stood ajar, instrumental piano spilled into the corridor. Inside, Cashin waited by a fireplace, silhouette cut from obsidian. He wore no jacket, only a charcoal shirt unbuttoned at the throat. Shadows carved hollows beneath his cheekbones as though sleep had fled him since their last meeting. You could have asked through counsel, she said, forcing evenness. I don't trust counsel where you're concerned. He gestured to a chair, she remained standing. He poured 2 fingers of scotch, same Dalmore, set one glass untouched beside her, a peace offering or a weapon. You think Lantern is a smash and grab, he began. It isn't. He paced, words clipped. The plastics conglomerate is my stalking horse. Their bid triggers antitrust scrutiny, delaying closing. Meanwhile I spin Soligreen into a public benefit corporation under Helios stewardship. Investors get ESG sparkle, Rivers get remediation, and I get time to refinance those notes without gutting staff. Opaline folded arms. And the side letter granting them patent rights? A decoy I plan to void at the 11th hour. Paper armor. She studied him, eyes rimmed amber by firelight, hands restless. Could she believe this labyrinthine altruism? You could have told Alara. You could have trusted me. A humorless laugh escaped him. Trust? After I crossed every HR line carved in marble. I tried to erase you from this building so predators on my board wouldn't sniff leverage. I failed. His gaze softened, a fault line opening. When you left, everything tilted. I realized I convert people into assets because assets don't bruise. You bruise. The admission landed like a tremor. Opaline's throat tightened but she kept her spine steel. Words don't absolve the NDA you pushed. He stepped closer, held out a folded sheet, the separation agreement, edges frayed. Slowly he tore it in 2, then twice more, scraps falling like mute confetti onto Persian carpet. Irrevocable, he said, voice cracking. Silence pulsed. Opaline felt the night pivot around them, unresolved chords hanging. She reached into her coat, extracted the USB with original Lantern files. Proof or nothing, she said. Show me the Benefit Corp charter, the escrow holding patents safe. Cashin nodded, gestured to a laptop on the coffee table, fingers flying across keys. Documents bloomed, signed drafts, trustee lists, escrow stubs. Not airtight, dates still blank, but architecture of an ethical detour existed. Her shoulders loosened fractionally. You have 48 hours to notarize and publish. If you don't, Orion releases everything. I'll need your help, he said quietly. You know the lineage of those archive boxes. Help me strip the rot in daylight. Vulnerability bared itself in his eyes, a rare metal unsheathed. Opaline thought of Lazarus's creed, salvage the future, and of lighthouses that did not own the ships they saved. Daylight only, she replied. And no more secrets clasped behind NDAs. He extended his hand. She hesitated, then took it, an accord, not surrender. Heat flared where skin met, memory colliding with possibility. She withdrew first. "I'll text meeting details," she said, slipping the USB back into her pocket. At the door she paused. "Glass towers can bleed, Cashin. Your choice whether the blood is poison or cure." The corridor swallowed her footfalls. Inside the suite Cashin stood frozen, knuckles white around a glass he had not touched. In his mind, the 48-hour clock began its relentless tick. Downstairs, Opaline texted Lazarus, "He claims Decoy. Evidence partial. 48 HRS to prove." Lazarus, tick-tick. The river's watching. As she emerged into sleet, city lights refracted through wet air, scattering halos across asphalt. She felt no triumph, only the tectonic rumble of two empires steering toward collision, one cloaked in luminescent promises, the other wrapped in radical daylight. She buttoned her coat against wind that smelled of distant oceans and petrosludge, then walked east, plotting how to turn rival truths into a single rescue line strong enough to pull a planet's rivers back from the brink. The next morning Opaline arrived at Helios's 38th floor war room through a freight elevator that smelled of lubricant and secrecy. Cashin had insisted she slip in before the rest of senior staff, but even at 6:10 a.m. two night shift engineers guarded the door, badges clipped to hoodies like makeshift shields. Inside, 20 plasma screens wallpapered one wall, each showed a countdown, 35 hours 49 minutes and 12 seconds until the convertible notes matured, and a second clock labeled Soligreen charter filing ticking down 3 hours ahead of that. Cashin looked as though he had not left the building. He'd traded his charcoal shirt for a storm blue sweater, but the gray crescents beneath his eyes had darkened. He greeted her with a curt nod, then projected a document titled Soligreen PBC Operating Agreement, version 7.3. "Trustee sign-offs still missing," he said. "Elara is on board. 2 others will follow her vote. But Adler, our largest outside investor, refuses." Adler Darwish, hedge fund oracle turned Helios director, was infamous for shorting the very companies he served when ethics trimmed profits. Opaline scrolled. "Adler's stake becomes worthless if the notes default. He'll cave to self-interest." Cashin rubbed his temples. "Not if he's hedged the debt and stands to make more on our collapse." She winced. "Hedge against your own ship sinking," a page torn from a nihilist's hymnal. "Then we need leverage. Something he can't arbitrage." Cashin's gaze flicked to her, a question forming. She answered before he spoke. "I archived Adler's acquisition of Grenshaw Mining last year. The deal memo flagged an undisclosed methane leak under one of their Alaskan sites. If that data surfaced, EPA fines could dwarf his Helios position." Cashin's features knit between admiration and alarm. "You're proposing blackmail." "Stewardship," she corrected. "He trades in secrets. Show him some cost realignment." He exhaled, a sound between a laugh and a sigh. "Find the file." She returned to Orion House for the excavation. Lazarus was already in the bullpen, sleeves rolled, hair uncharacteristically disheveled. "Helios stock is whipsawing," he reported, pointing at a live graph. Rumor bots picked up talk of a mysterious PBC conversion. If the charter files in time, shorts die. If not, they feast. Opaline booted a cold storage server and dove into Helios's vaulted scans. 5,000 PDF search hits on Grenshaw narrowed to 20 once she added methane in Class 4 seep. At 11:23 she opened the smoking gun, a geologist's field note acknowledging seepage, exceeding federally permitted thresholds, and predicting groundwater influx within 8 months. The memo was countersigned Adler Darwish. She encrypted the file, then hesitated, Lazarus hovering over her shoulder. "Send to Cashin?" he asked. "After we escrow a copy with the Attorney General," she said. "Insurance against everyone." He considered, then nodded. 5 minutes later encrypted twins streaked along different fiber lines, one to the New York AG's Environmental Crimes inbox, the other to Cashin's private address. Noon. Cashin summoned Adler, Elara, and 3 more directors to the glass-walled executive gallery. Opaline observed from a side console because Cashin insisted, if Adler calls forgery, I want the archivist present. Adler arrived in a white linen jacket, green tie twitching like a carnivorous plant. When Cashin laid the methane memo on the tempered glass table, Adler's pupils constricted. He listened to Cashin's proposal, signed Soligreen over to public benefit stewardship, refinance the notes via a green bond, retain long-term upside. Or refuse and watch both the EPA and the AG ignite. For 30 seconds Adler said nothing. Then he picked up a gold pen, Gaia brand, ironically, and signed the trustee page with a flourish that scraped ink. One condition, he said. Locke remains CEO for the Bond Roadshow. Investors crave continuity. Cashin stiffened. Opaline remembered his earlier intention to resign. Before he could answer, Elara spoke, continuity requires conscience. Mr. Locke will stay only if this board ratifies a permanent ethics subcommittee chaired by Ms. Wren. Her steady gaze pinned Adler like a specimen slide. Opaline's breath caught. Cashin turned to her, unreadable. Archivist to ombudsman, he murmured. Adler scowled, saw the votes aligned against him, and shrugged theatrical surrender. Fine. File your saintly charter. But if quarterly returns shrivel, I'll hang you all in the press. Cashin slid the signed packet to Opaline. Take it to compliance. Electronic file then courier hard copy to Albany. His fingers brushed hers, an echo of last night's handshake, now pulsing electric with shared peril. By 3:57 p.m. the Soligreen PBC charter appeared on the state's public records server. Journalists swarmed. ESG funds bought Helios shares in a frenzy that drove short sellers into margin calls. On the ticker wall at Orion, the stock chart spiked like a cathedral spire. Lazarus whistled. The man pivots faster than rumor. And still stands on quicksand, Opaline replied. We converted one deal. His debt mountain remains. Her phone buzzed, Cashin. Conference room 8 p.m. bring nothing classified. Just you. She showed Lazarus, whose face tightened. You trust him now? I trust rivers more than alliances, she said. But some bridges must be walked. Conference room Meridian, 8:05. Only Cashin and 2 coffees waited. He gestured for her to sit, then pushed across a slim envelope marked with a green wax seal, Soligreen's crest. Board ratified your ombudsman post. Salary anything you wish within reason. Reporting line bypasses me straight to Elara. Opaline traced the seal, heart thumping. And you? I remain CEO through the bond issuance. After that, he exhaled. After that I want to build towers that don't bleed. But I don't know how from inside this one. She heard the unspoken plea. Leaving Helios would cost him empire, yet staying might cost him soul. Glass can be reforged, she said softly. But not if the furnace sabotages its own heat. He studied her as though she held a language he needed to translate. Stay, he said at last, not an order, but a question threaded with hope. Stay and be the flame keeper. The phrase hit her chest like an ember. She set aside the envelope, folded her hands. If I stay, no more sealed doors. No more buying silence. We draft a public ethics ledger, every acquisition, every lobbyist dollar. He nodded once, solemn vow. And no more scotch-laced mistakes. She met his eyes, a flicker of warmth sparking. Mistakes teach. We just can't repeat them. He smiled, halting, genuine. For the first time she saw not the predator of boardrooms but a man who had realized the cost of armor. They sat in quiet until city lights bloomed against the windows like distant bonfires, both knowing battles still lurked, bond ratings, hedge fund vengeance, federal probes, yet for one precarious evening the current of power no longer felt corrosive. It felt, astonishingly, clear. Opaline rose first, envelope in hand. At the door she paused. Flame keepers need oxygen. Don't forget to breathe, Cashin. As she walked down the corridor, her reflection caught in mirror glass panels, hair loose, spine straight, eyes lit by purposes larger than any severance check. Somewhere behind her, he whispered her name into the hush, but she didn't turn. Towers were reforging. Rivers waited for dawn. And Opaline Wren, archivist turned lighthouse architect, was already drafting blueprints for daylight too broad to be bought, too bright to be shut away again. The week that followed felt like living inside a gyroscope, every axis spun at once, yet somehow the center held. Helios's lobby screens looped a new mission reel, tidal marshes rinsed clean by emerald algae, children in recycled plastic sneakers stamped with a soligreen leaf, while on the mezzanine Cashin and Opaline assembled the first ethics ledger, Stand Up. The ledger would publish, in real time, every political donation, every third-party consultant contract, every carbon offset cost. Legal counsel called it suicidally transparent, but consumer sentiment rocketed. ESG analysts upgraded Helios's shadowed BBB to a provisional A. Opaline's mornings began at 5:30 with encrypted calls to tiny laboratories in Siberia, Malawi, Veracruz, former grant recipients of Soligreen now invited back as equity partners in the Public Benefit Corporation. By 9, she was chairing ombudsman hearings. Employees could now lodge objections to supply chain shortcuts without routing through HR. At noon she dashed across town to Orion House for a 1-hour strategy sync with Lazarus, still her formal boss, though the lines blurred. There, amid the caffeine haze of open-source idealists, she perfected the code that fed Helios disclosures straight into Orion's public data vault, a living footnote that proved daylight didn't care about corporate borders. It was on Wednesday, during one such noon sprint, that the first tremor hit. Lazarus hailed her from his glass pod, jaw set. Bond rating call just ended, he said. Standard & Worth dropped a surprise rider. Before they grant the green label, Helios must settle its outstanding OSHA litigation from the Grenshaw mines, $30 million worth. Opaline frowned. Cashin earmarked $5 million for settlements. Not enough. Lazarus slid a document across his desk, a glossy press brief stamped Castor Moss Strategies. The same reputation mercenaries who had forged video of her now circulated leaked injury reports, real this time, showing sulfur-burned miners Grenshaw had medically retired for pennies. Where'd they get those, she asked, though the sinking in her gut already knew. Lazarus's gaze softened. Adler. His parting shot. Adler had publicly praised the PBC move, but apparently not forgiven their leverage trick. If the green bond failed, Helios would default, and Adler's short position would pay handsomely. Opaline pinched the bridge of her nose. Castor Moss will spin this as hypocrisy. Helios touts river cleanup while hiding human scars. Unless Helios pays full restitution, Lazarus said. 30 million plus interest. Cashin doesn't have that liquid. He will, Opaline said, though she wasn't sure how. Back at Helios she found Cashin in the 26th-floor sky garden, sleeves rolled, ripping dead leaves from basil planters like an exorcism. She briefed him, his jaw hardened. Adler wants to choke us with our own past, he muttered. Fine. We'll amputate the debt. How? She asked. He wiped soil from his hands. By selling the only asset I swore never to surrender, the downtown penthouse portfolio. Opaline blinked. His real estate crown jewels brought in predictable cash flow, pledging them had always been Cashin's absolute last fallback. He paced as if talking himself into a cliff dive. I unload the units to Black Elm REIT, the OSHA victims get whole settlements into a medical trust, and the ratings agency can't argue we're hiding liabilities. She laid a hand on his forearm. Those apartments are your fortress. I need bridges now, not walls. She felt his pulse quick under her fingertips, fear braided with resolve. Do it, she said. The sale raced through in 48 hours, Opaline notarized trust documents until her signature blurred. Grenshaw miners in Alaska woke to find their payout notices delivered by courier and an apology letter on Helios stationery. Castor Moss tried to flip the narrative, Billionaire scrambles to buy forgiveness, but video of miners crying in relief blunted cynicism. Social feeds reframed the story, this is how you fix extraction, own it, fund it, publish receipts. Standard and Worth removed the writer. The green bond rating landed, AAG. Yet victory came with a ghost. On Friday evening, after the last underwriting ink dried, Cashin met Opaline on the rooftop overlooking the Hudson. The skyline glowed peach, his eyes reflected a darker horizon. Sold properties finalized, he said. The board's ecstatic. But I handed them my safe place to sleep. She squeezed his hand. Homes are portable when you build them from people. He smiled, weary. Speaking of people, Lazarus invited me to join the Orion Data Consortium as token capitalist reprogrammed. Apparently I'm lecture circuit gold now. Would you? She asked. Maybe. He stared out at fairy wakes slicing copper water. But first we close the bond next Tuesday. Then, if you're willing, we renegotiate our personal ledger. Heat colored his cheeks. Dinner without NDAs. A laugh bubbled from her, surprise and yes, threaded tight. No Scotch mistakes, she warned. No Scotch, he echoed. Saturday proved quiet until 9:07 p.m., when Lazarus texted a link, breaking, SEC opens probe into possible insider manipulation of Helios Green Bond. Anonymous complaint alleged that Locke had suppressed material risk regarding liquefaction seep, still active under Grenshaw. Opaline's lips went cold. She dialed Cashin, he picked up on the second ring, voice raw. I know. SEC subpoena landed 10 minutes ago. Wasn't us, she said. Someone forged new leakage data. More likely Castor Moss repackaged old sensor logs, stripped the repair timestamps. He exhaled. If the SEC issues a Wells notice before Tuesday, the bond buyers scatter. We need irrefutable field verification, she said. Live sensors, third-party audit, drone footage. It's northern Alaska in March. 30 below. Then we fly. She was already pulling boots from her closet. Cashin's silence crackled across the line, then, night jet leaves Teterboro at 2 o'clock. You, me, Maeve Ellingson. And bring Lazarus, he'll insist. 4 hours later a Gulfstream carved moonlit sky, snowcaps glittering beneath. Maeve calibrated a portable spectrometer, while Lazarus unboxed a thermal drone labeled property of Orion. Cashin, strapped into a leather seat, studied sectional charts, brow knitted. Opaline sat opposite, knees brushing his when turbulence jostled. He met her gaze, exhaustion softened by gratitude. You could have chosen safety, he murmured. Instead you keep lighting lighthouses in blizzards. Someone taught me towers can bleed, she answered. My job is making sure the blood isn't hidden. His smile was fragile, hopeful. Outside the window dawn stitched pale gold across the Arctic rim, hinting at landscape still sharp with peril yet promising the clarity only cold air can give. Opaline closed her eyes, heartbeat sinking to the engine's steady roar, and prepared for a journey where proof would freeze or melt, where trust would either fracture under polar night or crystallize into something unbreakable. In 7 hours they would stand on cracked tundra, wind knifing through layers, droning live to SEC feed servers. In 7 hours they would discover whether the planet accepted their reckoning. But in this suspended dark, Opaline felt certainty bloom. Truth, like the sun, might abandon the horizon for a time, but it always returns, and she would pilot its first rays, even if glass towers shattered in the light. Wind knifed across the North Slope airstrip as Opaline stepped down the Gulfstream's folding stairs, her first breath a shock of metal-cold oxygen that burned the back of her throat. Marble-hard moons of snow scrolled to a black horizon where pump jacks stood frozen in silhouette. The sun, an anemic coin, would arc only a handspan above the tundra before slumping back into twilight, but Maeve Ellingson checked her watch and declared, we have exactly 3 hours of usable light, after that the cameras frost. A battered Sprytek shuttle, engine idling like a disgruntled bear, ferried them 40 miles to Grenshaw Site 14. Cashin rode up front with the Inuit driver, translating map coordinates into sled trail detours when plowed roads vanished under drift. In the rear compartment Lazarus assembled the thermal drone, stubby carbon wings, gimbal nose studded with LiDAR beads, while Opaline synced its telemetry to Orion's public server. She typed a message to the SEC's enforcement inbox, live feed commencing, AUTH token 47C, Pharos. No more accusations in darkness, whatever they found would unfold pixel by pixel in the agency's own data lake. Site 14 appeared as a low berm of snow crowned by a rust-flecked vent stack. The methane seep that had fueled Castor Moss's new allegation supposedly hissed beneath. Maeve took gas samples with gloved precision, sensors chirping insignificant parts per million. "If this leak's active, it's microscopic," she muttered. Lazarus launched the drone. Its rotors carved halos in blowing ice crystals as it climbed to 200 feet and began a grid. Infrared feed painted the white world in radioactive oranges, any pocket of warm gas would flare scarlet. Nothing. 5 passes, nothing. Maeve's handheld confirmed, background methane no higher than Arctic baseline. Opaline exhaled a plume. "They forged logs," she said. Relief gusted through her, edged by anger at the ease of digital lies. Cashin motioned them toward an auxiliary shed, half buried. Original sensors were in there. "Let's pull storage cards, prove tampering." They trudged across wind-whipped crust. Inside, the shed smelled of diesel ghosts, a wall of instrumentation blinked amber on battery backup. Maeve eased open the primary logger. Its solid-state cartridge was gone, base slot empty. "Someone beat us," Lazarus said. Their driver shouted from outside. A snow crawler, military green, windows blacked, skidded around the berm trailing powder. 2 figures in parkas dismounted, hauling jerry cans and a welding torch. Opaline's gut hit 0 Kelvin. "They'll burn the shed, destroy absence of evidence." Cashin stepped into the wind, hands raised. "Private property," he called. "Helios cleanup team." The lead intruder yanked back a hood, Adler Darwish, eyes rheumy with cold hate. "Cleanup, indeed," he shouted, brandishing the torch. "Market loves a catastrophe. Too bad about the investigators who froze trying to cover it up." Maeve whispered, "He'll ignite the vent stack, make a fireball visible from satellites." Adler's partner flicked a lighter over the jerrycan spout. Cashin moved, a blur in gray tundra, and slammed into the man. Fuel splashed, lighter flying. Adler lunged, torch hissing, but Opaline tackled him from behind, years of Midwest softball translating into a driving shoulder. They crashed into powder. The torch skittered, flame sputtering against snowpack. Lazarus dragged Adler upright, arm wrenched behind his back. Opaline scrambled to her knees, chest heaving. Cashin retrieved the fallen sensor cartridge from the saboteur's coat pocket, serial number intact. He raised it to his body cam. "Live to SEC feed," he said, voice a growl. Evidence of criminal interference by Director Adler Darwish. From her console in New York, an enforcement analyst whispered, "Holy, are we getting this in real time?" Snowmobiles crested the ridge, state troopers summoned by Maeve's earlier satellite phone ping. Sirens wailed thin as reeds in the gale. Adler stiffened in Lazarus's grip, eyes flicking to the streaming drone overhead. Paperwork swarmed the Prudhoe Bay substation for 6 hours, sworn statements, chain of custody seals, breath plaque frost on every signature. At 1800 hours, the SEC issued an emergency halt on Adler's trading accounts and a public note exonerating Helios of concealment. The green bond financing held. Exhaustion flattened Opaline against a bench in the tiny terminal. Cashin crossed the room, sat beside her, and extended a thermos of instant cocoa. She sipped, it tasted of tin and improbable sweetness. "You saved the bond," he said. "You saved the shed," she countered. They shared a brittle laugh, nerves untangling. Outside, polar night bruised the sky. Inside, sodium lights etched fine lines of fatigue around Cashin's eyes. He whispered, "I almost lost everything again, because I tried to shoulder it alone." Opaline set the thermos down, gloves brushing his. "Next time you act solo, I'll subpoena your instincts," she said. He covered her hand, heat pulsing through wool layers, and nodded, promise forged in silence. When the return jet lifted, drone footage of an intact vent stack looped across cable news. Analysts revised price targets upward. Castor Moss's website vanished into 404 silence. Above the clouds, Opaline watched aurora curtains ignite, green rivers writhing across starfields. Cashin dozed, head against seat, fingers still curled around hers. She thought of lighthouses, some were towers of stone, others, the hands we clasp in turbulence, guiding us back to north when even daylight seems like myth. The engines droned him soft, and beneath that lullaby she drafted her next ethics entry, all disclosures verified on site, March 18. Transparency cannot be remote, it must walk the ground. Tomorrow they would land to fresh onslaughts, bond roadshows, press panels, trial dates for Adler. But for these few hours, high above the Arctic night, truth had altitude, and the hearts that carried it beat steady, synchronized, preparing for the long flight still ahead. Cashin Locke spent the Monday after Alaska in a glass-walled conference suite high above Wall Street, pitching Helios's inaugural Earth Yield Bond to a battalion of institutional investors whose ties cost more than most cars. Opaline watched from the back row beside Maeve, fingers poised over a tablet streaming real-time sentiment. The bond, $700 million at 2.1%, would refinance the crushing short-term notes and finance 6 additional Soligreen remediation hubs. Every slide Cashin advanced pulsed with live QR links to the public ethics ledger. Data transparency itself had become the product. Investors loved it, until one gray-haired partner from Vanguard Capital raised a hand. "Your disclosure model is admirable," he said, voice smooth as river stones, "but suppose a future CEO lacks your conviction. What locks the ledger open forever?" Cashin did not glance at his counsel. Instead he pivoted the clicker to Opaline's chart, a flow diagram labeled Helios Freedom Protocol. "Our bylaws now embed a cryptographic escrow," he explained. "Every board resolution, audit, or lawsuit auto-uploads to an Ethereum sidechain public key held by our Ombudsman's office, by Ms. Wren. Altering or disabling that pipeline requires a 90% supermajority plus Delaware court approval. In short, gentlemen, the gate has no hinges." A ripple of surprise murmured across the mahogany. The Vanguard partner sat back, half-smile conceding the match. Opaline felt pride bloom, and wait. The key to Helios's conscience literally resided in a biometrically sealed YubiKey around her neck. By noon, oversubscription hit 2.4 times. Underwriters beamed. Cashin shook hands, press cameras flashing. Yet as they exited into the elevator lobby, he sagged against the chrome wall, eyes glassy with exhaustion. Opaline pressed a water bottle into his hand, he gulped, throat working like machinery starved of oil. "That was your last roadshow stop," she whispered. "Feels like my last breath," he rasped. "Come to the penthouse tonight. One quiet dinner. No scotch, as promised." She hesitated. Their intimacy still hovered in undefined airspace, warmer than friendship, rawer than romance. But after Arctic winds, she trusted the compass. "All right," she said, pulse thudding. At dusk she arrived at Helios Tower's 63rd floor carrying Thai takeout, an inside joke about their first disastrous minibar breakfast. The suite looked stripped, art removed, closets bare. Only a folding table faced the window where city night glimmered. Cashin greeted her in rolled-sleeve Henley, hair damp from a shower. "I sold the furniture with the condos," he explained, setting cartons on the table. "Everything except this view." They ate pad CEW from paper boxes, knees knocking under the flimsy table, laughter loosening the week's knots. After dinner he produced a slim envelope. "Title transfer for the last property, a Catskills cabin my parents left me. I kept one refuge. I'm glad, she said, meaning it. He opened a second envelope, smaller. There's something else. Inside lay a laminated card bearing the Ethereum address of the ethics ledger and a line of text, Custody Delegate, Opaline Wren. Below, his signature. I want the world to know, he said, that the key lives with someone whose first instinct is candor, not cover-up. If I ever compromise, you can lock me out. The gesture carved a hollow of tenderness inside her ribs. Guardianship is lonely, she whispered. Not if guardians guard each other. His hand brushed hers, shy despite everything they'd survived. She turned her palm upward. Their fingers intertwined, firm as a notarized seal. They moved to the window, Manhattan sprawled like a circuit board, rivers soldered by bridges. He spoke against her hair, in 2 weeks the bond fund's clear. I'll step back, appoint Maeve to oversee bioremediation. Then I want to build a nonprofit that teaches other CEOs how to open their ledgers before the subpoenas hit. Name it Lighthouse Institute, she suggested, cheek warming his chest. And promise me your first seminar is in that Catskills cabin, limited seats, excellent hiking. He laughed softly. Only if the syllabus includes foraging and forgiveness. The next morning, while Opaline served as token witness at the closing bell ceremony, Earth Yield bonds now trading under ticker HYLD, Lazarus called from Orion. Castor Moss computer seized by the feds. Adler flipped, pled guilty, gave up the PR firm. You two might actually have slain the rumor dragon. Dragons molt, she cautioned. But yes, today feels lighter. Lazarus's tone softened. Helios doesn't deserve you, but the world needs this model. Stay dangerous, friend. She pocketed the phone, breath catching on a swell of gratitude. Danger no longer meant secrets swirling, it meant truth standing tall without armor. As confetti cannons boomed on the exchange floor, Cashin caught her eye across the crowd. He mouthed, ready to breathe. She nodded. Together they slipped away, past reporters, past bronze plaques, into daylight pouring down Broad Street. Above, mirrored facades no longer looked like wounds waiting to open, they looked like prisms catching sun. Glass towers could still bleed, but with every ledger entry, every river cleansed, each pane sealed a little stronger, not against scrutiny, but against rot. They walked south toward the harbor where wind smelled of salt and cargo dreams. He laced his fingers through hers, and this time she didn't flinch from the flashbulbs. The story was no longer theirs to hide, it belonged to whatever future learned by their missteps, wrote better contracts, loved without collateral, and kept every window clear enough for dawn to blaze through unhindered. 6 months after the Earth Yield bond rang the closing bell, the Catskills cabin awoke to the susurrus of late summer rain and the metallic rasp of a French press plunger. Opaline stood at the plank table, hair braided down one shoulder, reading the morning's Ledger Digest on a tablet that still smelled faintly of sawdust, because she had spent half the night installing a solar router beneath the eaves. Through the open window rose the scent of wet pine and the faraway rumble of a creek newly swollen with cloudburst runoff. No claxons of breaking news, no bored pings, just the steady drum of water and the small, flaring piece of work well fought for. Cashin padded in barefoot, clutching blueprints edged with coffee rings. He set them beside her mug. Draft curriculum, he said, voice still velvet with sleep. Title block read, Lighthouse Institute, Cohort 1, Executive Transparency Residency. The first session was slated for October, a single-week immersion limited to 12 CEOs willing to live off-grid, cook communal meals, and publish their darkest ledger footnotes by the final campfire. Maeve signed on as co-instructor, Cashin added. Lazarus volunteers to deconstruct greenwashing case studies, provided we supply contraband cappuccinos. Opaline smiled, wider every time she thought of Lazarus lounging on a stump, lecturing hedge fund magnates while fending off mosquitoes. And you? What's your official title now that Helios voted you Emeritus Founder? He leaned against the doorframe, rain-specked light slicing across his cheekbones. Caretaker. Of property, of people. Of whatever ideals we hammer into these rafters. Her pulse tugged at the key around her neck, the UB key still mapped to Helios's side chain, though she accessed it only to notarize quarterly audits these days. Caretaker suits you, she said softly. But institute bills still need signatures. She tapped the blueprint. I've seen your autograph. It's terrible. He laughed, the sound mingling with the rain. Pretend it's calligraphy of contrition. He sobered. Truth is, I never planned beyond crisis. The company, the bond, always survival mode. You taught me longevity requires architecture, not adrenaline. She slid the tablet away, caught his hand. We designed foundations together. Now we furnish the rooms. After breakfast they hiked the ridge trail, storm clouds shirking westward. Below, the valley unfurled patched fields and the faint glimmer of the Delaware River, whose current would one day carry Soligreen's biofilms downstream to trap microplastics before they reached the Atlantic. Cashin stopped at a bald overlook, wind tugging his hoodie, and produced a small wooden box from his pack. No diamonds, he said, opening it to reveal two identical titanium bands polished to a sheen softer than steel, just recycled fuselage metal from Helios's first satellite division, deorbited last spring with all telemetry public. Seems fitting. Opaline's breath caught. Rain pearls clung to his lashes, he blinked them away but not the tremor in his voice. Will you marry me, Opaline Wren? No NDAs, no severance clauses, just reciprocal vested interest. Emotion surged, fierce as glacier melt, carrying memories of flannel shirts and bitter scotch, of methane leaks and midnight drones, of towers bleeding and rivers clearing. She took one ring, slipped it onto her own finger first, his startled laugh gusted out, then guided the other onto his hand. Consider the merger approved, she said. Share structure, 50-50 plus golden veto if either forgets why we started. He folded her into a slow, rain-damp kiss that tasted of pine and permanence. Far below, a freight train's horn threaded the valley, carrying produce and solar panels and the ordinary cargo of a planet quietly rerouting its future. Autumn found the cabin humming with the first lighthouse cohort. 12 leaders in borrowed flannel lugged coolers up the porch steps, half terrified of the radical candor contract they'd signed. Classes convened around a reclaimed barn door propped on sawhorses, nights ended in the clearing where stars blazed unimpeded by city glass. On Thursday each executive stood before the group and read a confession previously buried in legalese, an exploited cobalt mine, a manipulated KPI, a silenced whistleblower. Cashin listened, posture easy, yet Opaline saw the muscle tick at his jaw as old versions of himself were exhumed in their words. When his turn arrived he didn't read from notes. He told the story of a young deal scavenger who mistook acquisition for creation and tried to pay a woman out of his life because he feared the reflection her honesty forced him to see. Around the fire, no one rustled. The night inhaled his admission and exhaled understanding. After the final session, the executives filed into the barn loft where a thermal printer clattered out their future pledges, smart contracts anchoring transparency triggers to their blockchains. They left at dawn with ash in their hair and a new discomfort, the kind you feel when conscience outgrows its shell. Winter settled deep, snow chalking the hemlocks, yet the cabin remained a bright node in networks Opaline never ceased weaving, a mentorship web linking Arctic miners to Bay Area coders, a public dashboard that let any 8th grader watch pollutant parts per million in real time. The ethics ledger expanded to other firms, each column tagged powered by Lighthouse. One January evening Cashin returned from a lecture in Oslo, cheeks wind-burned, and found Opaline on the porch bench editing the Institute's first annual report. He handed her a folded newspaper, the Financial Herald, front page blaring, Lighthouse model, Spurs SEC proposal for mandatory real-time corporate disclosures. She scanned the article, heart stumbling. Do you ever miss the thrill of stealth acquisitions? She teased, half serious. He considered, then shook his head. Thrill is overrated. I prefer the quiet panic of answering children's emails asking why my company still emits 5,000 tons of CO2 and how fast we'll cut it. She laughed, leaned against him, and closed her laptop. Night pressurized the silence around them, snow glittered under a crescent moon. Somewhere down valley a church bell tolled hour 9, time once measured in quarterly filings, now paced by the steady beating of sustainable motives. Cashin brushed his thumb over her ring, fuselage turned covenant. Glass towers can still crack, he mused, but now there are lighthouses shining through them. Enough light and cracks become prisms. Opaline threaded her fingers through his. And prisms bend darkness into colors. The word settled like embers on fresh snow, warm, resilient, ready to glow again at first blush of dawn. Inside, the cabin's router blinked its tiny green heartbeat, transmitting another packet of unvarnished numbers to whoever cared to look. Outside, the world turned under constellations that had witnessed empires of secrecy rise and fall, and now observed two stewards, once adversary and archive, crafting a different inheritance, one where love required no cloak, where power courted accountability rather than fear, and where rivers ran clearer each season, mirroring skies unclouded by hidden fires.